Hello everyone, so today we're going to talk about finding 10% of a number and how that relates to place value. Well, if you watched our other video, you know that percentage means out of 100, which means that 50% equals 1/2 and 25% equals 1/4. So in that case, 10% is going to equal 10 out of 100, because out of 100, 10%, 10 out of 100. If you simplify that down, you're going to get 1/10. So what we're going to look at now is finding 10% of a number. Basically that means finding 1/10. So if we had obviously 100, we look at it, so 10% of 100, well, we already know it's 10 because by definition it's 10 out of 100. But if we were doing it by taking the rule of 1/10, well, it's actually 100 divided by 10 equals 10. So that means that 10% of 70 equals 70 divided by 10 equals 7. And then 10% of 80 equals 80 divided by 10 equals 8. So I hope you followed that. I wonder how you were calculating the dividing by 10 bit. Some people say that when you divide by 10, all you do is take off a 0. So for example, 10% of 40 equals 40 divided by 10 equals, so we're taking off the 0 and we get 4. Then 10% of 30 equals 30 divided by 10 equals, so always, so take off the 0 and we get 3. Okay, and I'd say that's a good rule because you quite often get asked, okay, what is 10% of this number, and it has a 0 on the end. That's fine. Or if your number doesn't have a 0 on the end, so 10% of, let's say, 75. How do you work out the answer to that? Well, we've looked previously at place value. Place value is about the fact that the value of an integer, so a number from 0 to 9, its value depends on where it is in relation to the decimal point. There's no decimal point in this number, but if there was, so if we had 75, the decimal point, 75.0, the value of the 5, because it's next to the decimal point, is 5, whereas the value of the 7 is 70, so it's kind of a lot more relatively. So say you have 55.5. They're all 5s, but they've got different values. That is worth 0.5, which is a half. That is worth 5. That is worth 50. And the point is, if you're dividing by 10, all you're doing is changing the position. So with our 75, if we divide it by 10, what we're going to do is change the value of those to make them 10 less. So that means we're moving everything this way, so we get 7.5. So 10% of 75 equals 7.5. So there's a bit of controversy in schools between tutors and teachers and parents and children about how you do place value calculations, because the purists will say, well, you have to move all the numbers. But in reality, if you've got a piece of paper with numbers on, you can't move those numbers. So it's much easier to move the decimal point. So if we've got 75.0, if we move the decimal point to the left, we then get 7.5. Slight variant on that I'm going to do. So if you want to work out 10% of a number which has got no decimal places or no decimal point, what you do is, and this works with, if we go back to 70, it'll work with 70, you put a decimal point in front of the final number, so 7.0, so in other words 7. Okay, so to calculate 10% of a whole number, put a decimal point in front of the last digit. There you are. So to calculate 10% of a whole number, put a decimal point in front of the last digit. So let's just do a few examples. Just go to the green pen for that. So, we've already done it with that one. So 10% of 45, I'm going to put a decimal point there. So that will put the decimal point in there, which makes it 44.5. So 10% of 45, we're going to put in the point there, so the answer is 4.5. 10% of 25 equals, put in a decimal point there, 2.5. One last one before we run out of space on this screen. 10% of 24, putting a decimal point there, is 2.4. Right, so I'm going to get rid of those, and then we're just going to go through a few more calculations before we do the test. We're just going to throw those pens on the ground as well. Hopefully that didn't wake anyone up. Right, just better pick them up, otherwise I might fall over them. That will certainly wake you up. Okay, so we're just going to do a few more calculations of 10%. So remember, starting off, we're going to put a decimal point in front of the last digit. So 10% of 70, decimal point in there, 7.5. 10% of 77, put in our decimal point, 7.5. 10% of 91, put in decimal point there, that would be 9.1. And then 10% of 33 is, put in decimal point there, 3.3. Okay, what if you've already got a decimal point? So let's do 10% of 1.7. Well, this is where we do our moving the decimal point to the left, which for the purist would be moving the numbers to the right, so that would be 0.17. So 10% of 3.8 would be, move that decimal point to there, 0.38. Or what if you've got 10% of a number less than 1? So 10% of 0.6. So you could say we're moving the decimal still, because you could say that 0.6 is 0.6. So move the decimal there, so you get the answer of 0.06. Or you could just say we're going to slide in a 0 to there. Okay, so 10% of 0.3, we're going to slide in an extra 0 here, so that will give you 0.03. Or if you've already got that, a 0 in there, so 10% of 0.04, you're just going to add another 0. So add in another 0 will give you 0.004. Excellent. So get yourself ready then. Get your pen, your paper ready for some quiz questions. 4 questions then on finding 10%. So question 1, what is 10% of 70? Question 2, what is 10% of 65? Question 3, what is 10% of 4? And then the last question, what is 10% of 0.3? Okay, so if you haven't worked them all out yet, then pause the video, work them out, and then I'll go through them. Okay, so 10% of 70, we could say we take off the 0, that would give us 7. 10% of 65, we could put a decimal point in there, which will give us 6.5. 10% of 4 will give us 0.4, just we're putting a decimal point in front of the last number. We're going to slide a 0 in here, so 10% of 0.3 will be 0.03. Okay, that's the questions on 10% and place value. Thank you for watching that video, and if you enjoyed that, please check out our website for more great online resources. So the address is www.routes2success11plus.uk, or find us on Twitter @routes2success. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great videos. Thank you.